It was around 11:30 at night. I had just finished the closing shift at the local Price Chopper and wanted to get a quick workout in before heading home. I had the day off the next day, so I wasn't worried about being tired or anything. I was just excited to actually be able to sleep in. And I never sleep better than I do after tiring myself out at the gym. As I pulled into the parking lot that night, I was happy to see that there were only a handful of cars, which meant to me that the gym was going to be empty. And when I walked in, I was happy to see that I was right. There wasn't anyone in sight aside from one worker who was sweeping up in the corner of the building. First things first, I needed to head to the locker room to use the bathroom and then get changed out of my jeans and into my sweats. As I walked into the locker room, I was surprised to see that there was actually someone else in the gym with me, but they appeared to be leaving as they had their hoodie and jeans on. He and I made eye contact with each other as he exited the locker room that I was going into. I wasn't sure what it was, but there was something about the way he was staring at me as I passed him. He looked as though he had just been caught. Doing what? I had no idea. At least, not yet. I tried not to pay the man any mind and just continued past him as I made my way into the locker room. Thankfully, it looked like there was no one else in there, so I walked up to one of the empty lockers and began getting changed into my workout clothes. The entire time I was getting changed, though, I couldn't help but feel as if someone had been staring at me. But every time I looked over my shoulder, there was no one there. I finished getting changed, and I put my bag into the locker and placed my padlock on to ensure that no one could get inside. I turned to exit the locker room, and that was when I saw something that made my stomach turn. I stumbled backward and knocked into the set of lockers behind me as I noticed a big red splatter across the wall at the back of the locker room. And though I hoped and prayed that it was some strange red paint, something in me knew that it was blood. My eyes couldn't help but follow the blood that had been strewn across the wall. And as my eyes followed the trail, I immediately noticed that one of the taller, full-size lockers had a small pool of red liquid dripping out of the bottom of it. I began to hyperventilate as my mind tried to process what was going on. The first thing that I could think to do was grab my phone out of my pocket and begin calling the police. But before I could even begin dialing, I felt those eyes on me again. My head looked frantically at both of my sides, but I couldn't see anyone. That was when I figured that I should get one of the workers as I called the police. I would feel safer if I had someone around me. As I walked out of the locker room, I began scanning the gym for the man who I'd seen sweeping the floor. But as I looked around, I was horrified to see the man who I had seen leaving the locker room as I was going inside. He was just standing over near one of the treadmills and staring in my direction. I tried to act if I didn't notice him, and I kept looking for the worker, and as soon as I saw him, I began walking toward him. As I approached the worker, I could feel the man who had been standing at the treadmill staring at me, but I knew that I couldn't stop and look back. I finally made it to the worker and began explaining that I had seen what I believed was blood in the locker room. But before I could finish my sentence, he stopped me. "Sir," he said, "there is an office right over there. We need to run and lock the door now." I was confused and wasn't quite sure what he was talking about. That was when he yelled, "Run now!" And I didn't hesitate any longer. I turned to the door that he was talking about and I began running toward it. I could see why he was so worried. The hooded man was no longer near the treadmill. Instead, he was making his way toward the two of us, and at the time, it was clear to see a large knife in his hand. The worker and I sprinted toward the office and threw the door closed behind us. The worker locked the door and then proceeded to place a chair up against it just in case. By the time we had secured ourselves, I was already on the phone with the police, letting them know that we needed help at the gym. They assured me that they had units on the way and to sit tight. The worker ended up pulling up the security camera as we waited in a panicked state for the police to arrive. There was one camera that had been pointed in the direction of the office, and we could clearly see the man pacing on the other side of the door. He was clearly in a panic and unsure what to do. It took the man a few minutes before he decided to make a run for it, but by that point, it was too late. When he ran out into the parking lot, multiple police had already been pulling in, and they managed to apprehend the man quite easily. After explaining to the officers what I had seen in the locker room, they had to go and confirm that it was blood and not something else. It turned out that there was a body in the locker that I had seen dripping with blood. It was a young man who couldn't have been older than 20. The police report claimed that he had been stabbed 22 times before being shoved into the locker. I had apparently walked in just as the killer was getting ready to leave the scene of the crime. But when he saw me, he began to panic, and in his unstable state couldn't think properly, and instead of running, he attempted to kill me and the worker at the gym as well. I used to love taking my little sister to the gym. It was one of the few activities that we both enjoyed. However, that all changed one day, and ever since, I haven't felt comfortable taking her to the gym without our parents or someone else with us. You see, I was 17 years old, and my sister had just turned 14. We were both going about our typical routine at the gym, and at some point, we always ended up separating for about 20 minutes while I work with some of the machines, and she goes and does some cardio. It usually wasn't a big deal, but about halfway through the rest of my workout, I received a text from her that said, "I think someone is following me." I immediately went into a panic and began looking around the gym for my sister, and when I found her, she was actually making her way toward me. I'll never forget the panic that was in her eyes. As I got up and approached her, right away I could see who she was talking about. There was this older man who looked to be around 50 years old, who was so locked into her with his eyes that he didn't even notice me staring right at him. "All right, we're going home," I said to her, and I grabbed my water bottle in one hand, my sister's hand in the other, and we began to make our way out of the gym. There was no one at the front desk, otherwise I would have reported the incident, but there wasn't, so we just continued out to the parking lot toward my car. As we made our way through the parking lot, my sister couldn't help but look over her shoulder. That was when I felt her hand grip mine tighter, which caused me to look back as well. The man was still following us, and this time he was moving faster as if he was trying to catch up to us. I took my keys out of my pocket and handed them to my sister before telling her to run to the car. As she began running forward, I decided to turn and face the creep. "Sir, can you please stop following us?" I started to say, but before I could finish my sentence, he managed to get right in front of me and just sort of pushed me out of the way. I grabbed onto his shirt to stop myself from falling and to get him to stop going toward my sister. He didn't like that and ended up stopping for just long enough to punch me across the face. I fell to the ground. I began to panic even more as I now didn't know if I could stop the man. "Lock the door!" I yelled out to my sister as I saw her getting into the passenger side of the car. The man continued to make his way toward my car, and to this day, I don't know what would have happened had other people had not been around. Just as he was getting closer to the car, I saw a group of 3 men catch up to the older man, and they grabbed onto him. One of them made their way over to me and asked if I was okay. I explained to them what was going on, and he actually let me know that he saw the whole thing, and he actually called the cops when we were still inside. He didn't like the way the man was staring at a few of the women and girls in the gym. To this day, my sister and I are forever thankful for those men who were around and stepped in, because I don't know what would have happened if they weren't there. Like most of my friends who go to the gym, I become a person of routine. I, of course, had to change my routine a little bit after the accident and needed to go through a couple of months of physical therapy. But still, I decided to keep my membership. I just take it a bit easier nowadays. The incident occurred about a year and a half ago. The Planet Fitness in my area had finally opened up again post-COVID, and at the time, my routine had become going to the gym 3 or 4 times a week before work in the morning. This meant that I was typically at the gym between the hours of 4 and 6 a.m. I liked these hours a lot because, for the most part, the gym was empty, and I could get what I needed to get done and then head out. I tried my best to get into a small routine where I would only work on certain muscle groups at a time and give myself an optimal amount of time to rest in between sessions. This seemed to be working for me for a while because I typically didn't get sore after working out like most of the people I knew, but I was still seeing the minor results that I was looking for. That being said, I'm still not sure exactly what went wrong with my body that day, but I should have just listened to my gut. You see, that morning I had been working on my chest and shoulders. I always started with cardio, then I would do some machines and on to free weights before finishing up with a bit more cardio. And that day, something told me that I should just skip the bench press. I'm not sure what it was, but something in my gut was telling me that I was too tired and should just skip it for the day and take it a bit easier. But I decided that I should stick to my routine and decided to go for it anyways. I adjusted the weight that was on the bar and made sure the bench was clear before laying back on it. Once I saw that everything was good, I got myself situated and began taking in some deep breaths before getting started. I lifted the bar from the 2 posts that were holding it up, and for some reason, it felt a bit heavier than usual. Still, I didn't let it stop me and began working on my set. The first 2 lifts were just fine, albeit a bit tough to squeeze out, but it was the third when everything went wrong. As I lifted the bar further away from my chest, I fully extended my arms, and that was when I felt it. My left elbow made a loud popping noise followed by a crack. I let out a shriek from pain, but quickly silenced as the bar fell onto my chest and knocked the wind out of me. Once again, I felt the pain of my bones cracking as my ribs and chest were crushed under the impact of the falling bar. My body flinched from pain, which then caused the bar to rolling toward my neck, pinning me to the bench and making it so that I could no longer catch my breath. I tried to scream both for help and from excruciating pain, but nothing came out. I couldn't breathe, and as I looked around, I began to panic even more because I couldn't see anyone in the gym. I kicked my legs and tried to squirm as much as I could to throw the weights off balance in hopes that they would slide off of me, but it was useless. The pain continued, and within a matter of minutes, everything started going black. All I could think was that I was going to die. Lucky for me, one of the workers ended up coming out of the locker room shortly after I passed out and rushed over to me. He took the weight off of me and called the ambulance. By the time I came to, the ambulance was already pulling up to the front of the building. When all said and done, I had 2 broken ribs, a broken sternum, and my elbow had popped out of place and dislocated itself before it buckled under the weight of the bar. And to this day, I'll say the pain was bad, but the worst part about the experience was the genuine fear that I was going to die lying underneath that bar.